Thank you for staying with Closing Bell South Africa. Now, just last week, Statistics South Africa released a surprising picture of accelerated growth in South Africa's manufacturing sector. Can investors and manufacturing stakeholders across the continent expect more from this glimmer of hope with this year's Manufacturing Indaba approaching? Joining me in studio for more is Coenraad Bezuidenhout. He is Managing Director of Strategic Communications FTI, and Patuxolo Nodada, who is the CEO of Busmark Group. Gentlemen, thank you very much for making the time to join me. Now, in anticipation of next week and the conversations that I think are going to be staged at the Indaba, let's have a quick conversation about what are the big expectations. We've spoken about a glimmer of hope in our introduction, but what realistically could be the focus? And Coenraad, I'll start with you.
Well, I think the fantastic opportunity is that tonight's obviously the State of the Nation address by the President, where he'll lay out the big themes of what they want to achieve with the economy in the next couple of years. So there'll obviously be mention of Eskom and so on, but also what support measures are going to be rolled out to bring stability to crucial upstream sectors like mining and agriculture, and then also for manufacturing itself. We know, for instance, that in autos there's been a great success in South Africa. Exports are doing very well in that regard at the moment, but we need the other incentives programs to also start working with the same kind of reliability and effectiveness. And then when the Manufacturing Indaba comes, there'll be opportunity for government stakeholders to put greater detail to the big themes that the President's going to be addressing tonight. So I think from an industry point of view, it's a great opportunity for people from the industry to go and make themselves familiar with what the road ahead is going to look like.
So Patuxolo, Coenraad seems to be pretty confident that we're going to have at least a thematic focus that's going to come out of the State of the Nation address, and that it's going to spill over into the conversations in the Indaba next week. Do you share the same sentiments?
Yes, I share the same sentiments because we've got a president who's positive, who's aggressive about creating jobs and employment, and his focus is to actually industrialize the South African economy, so we'll make sure that we can create more jobs. You would understand manufacturing is the biggest creator of jobs. Currently, countries that are consumers, give an example like Nigeria, they have oil refineries, but they don't produce their own oil and all of that. It's a challenge for them because they don't have a diversified economy. So, country like that needs manufacturing to make sure that it can grow and take it to a different stage. In South Africa, we probably the most diverse manufacturing or economy in Africa. And we have resources, we've got logistics, we've got skilled people, and I would even refer to you to say that South Africa was ahead of China in 1992 in terms of manufacturing, but we're now lagging up behind, even in South Korea.
I'll talk about smart factories in a short while, because we do know that there has been some interesting development in other parts of the continent where we're seeing markets trying to position themselves as the manufacturing hub for investors looking for that base. But before we do that, Coenraad, I think it's important to also for us to be realistic about the risks that are facing the local environment. If we look at the exchange rate volatility, for example, that we've been witnessing in the last week or so in South Africa, there are lots of risks that manufacturers need to navigate. So what are the headaches that continue to be stubborn that must be taken on at this Indaba if this is going to be a conversation that matters? So
there's upstream factors that need to be addressed. There needs to be stability around energy supply, around water supply. So those network industries are key, and then we need stability in mining and manufacturing in mining and agriculture, because they're such important upstream sectors that supply to manufacturing. If those are unsettled, then you always see a dip in manufacturing thereafter. So the electricity outages that we had in the first quarter, manufacturing fell by, I think, around 10%. So the increase that we've now seen in April is actually off a very low base because we were also in recession in the beginning of last year. So there's a lot that needs to be addressed, but I think the interesting thing now is that if you come in at the bottom of the market.
Right.
Almost. So there's great opportunity to grow, a great opportunity to grow into the rest of the continent and to grow exports. And certainly we can look forward over the next 5 to 10 years to more rational trade and industrial policy being applied to the sector in a more integrated way. And I think that kind of support, policy certainty, predictability will encourage investors. We've already seen investment rates increase quite significantly last year.
How are we doing, Patuxolo, on the policy certainty conversation? I mean, this has been an ongoing conversation for the longest of time. Are we getting to a point where we are fairly comfortable with what what regulates the industry?
I'd say that we're comfortable with the policies, especially in the automotive where I actually play, simply because the automotive policy have promoted most big international OEMs to base their manufacturing base here. The minimum requirement is that they must produce 50,000 cars a year. And BMW, Mercedes, Toyota, they're all doing that successfully. Now that our government has entered into the next phase of getting into the heavy commercial industry, which I participate. There's a localization or local content. We currently comply to 96% local content locally, and with that allows us to be competitive, to be protected against foreign entities. And I'm saying that is a good thing because that protects the jobs, in the country.
When we look at the conversation around the trade wars, Patuxolo, and I'll stay with you on this, should we be worried because South Africa is firmly part of a global value chain? We are assembling in some parts of the manufacturing process. Should we be concerned that if there are major disruptions in terms of trade patterns as we know them, that South Africa could actually find itself, and even other African markets that are investing heavily in manufacturing, find themselves out of these global value chains that they are now dependent on?
Okay, I'd say that the future of economic growth is in Africa. Africa will be growing about double digits, not looking outside of South Africa, and economically. That simply means that we are closer to the resources which we need to beneficiate. And most of the biggest problem of our African economies has been exporting minerals to the first world without value adding anything. And then those minerals comes back as a finished product, which then takes away the value of manufacturing. Now we are primed and positioned for the future to say that, everyone in the world is looking at us, Africa, to say that, what are we doing next to get into and to leapfrog? And people are basing, or companies, global entities, are basing their manufacturing entities here. This is an opportunity for us. I'll simply say this to you now. It's an opportunity that Huawei is fighting with the US. We can manufacture those cell phones, those iPads, those anything that is being done or needed by Apple in South Africa, because we've got all the right minerals. We've got the minerals that makes the battery. We've got the minerals that makes the plastic. We've got minerals that are on chips. We've got equipment in that space invested. We've got South African companies with capacity to manufacture TVs. Everything that is here, and the skill base is here. I just came out from a meeting now. I was surprised to say that a South African entity is given a job by a Canadian company just to do their process engineering.
Right.
And I was amazed with that effect. It simply means that we still have the skills. All what we need to do is to refine our skills and make sure that we can be able to compete globally. And I'm saying that we are best placed as South Africa for us to get into the rest of the continent.
So I want us to talk about the rest of the continent in a moment. But before we do that, Patuxolo talks a lot about opportunities. My question is, what needs to be true for us to actually translate these opportunities to the bottom line? And essentially, it's about, Coenraad, coming to the three most critical things for the manufacturing sector that would see us be the most attractive partner for international investors looking to set up their manufacturing bases here.
Well, I think the key thing is that we need to start realizing what we have locally and start looking after it. So when we say things like buy local, when we say we need to use our trade policy in a smart way so that we nurture our domestic industries, that in itself is not about protectionism, but making sure that we are able to bring our manufacturing capacity back online. Once you lose manufacturing capacity, once it has to be mothballed, it's very difficult to get that back. It takes a lot of investment, getting the skills back. It takes a lot. We've got more than a century of manufacturing history in South Africa. Great capacity. We do precision manufacturing better than the Chinese and as competitively as they do in the east of Europe. So it's harnessing those strengths and knitting together and using examples where there's been great successes, such as in automotives, to replicate that collaboration between business and government and other parts of manufacturing.
So we've run out of time, but I'm going to steal a final question for you, Patuxolo. 3 top markets in Africa where manufacturing is taking off and that investors could look to beyond South Africa?
Okay, East Africa is taking up aggressively. So if you look at Kenya, Nairobi, and Kigali, Rwanda, those are kind of definite markets that are actually uptake in terms of manufacturing. They understand to say what needs to be done. The next biggest market is in the West, in West Africa, which is in Lagos, Nigeria. And it's the biggest opportunity. If you set up there, you'll be 100 times the business of your business currently. Egypt is a stable market in terms of manufacturing, and it could just be advanced. So if you look at in a continent-wise, it's the East, which is anchored by Nairobi, and then Lagos anchoring the West, and then Egypt anchoring the North.
Well, there you have it. Certainly, Africa is open for business and certainly open to manufacturing investment right from the north to the east to the west and definitely here in South Africa as well. A very big thank you to my guest, Coenraad Bezuidenhout, as well, who is, of course, the Managing Director at Strategic Communications, FTI, and Patuxolo Nodada, who is the CEO of the Busmark Group. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be taking a look at the South African market close.